Let's decorate a soccer ball. In the free downloadable guide that walks through all the different steps of this sports balls cookie set, there's a better way to say that, but I think it's more fun to say sports balls. There is a template for you to print off specifically for this soccer ball. And what I recommend doing, and I say this in the guide, is to print off this soccer ball template, fold it in half so that you can easily cut out that hexagon in the middle, and then you can get all of the sides, and then you can put this on your cookie like I am doing right here. Come in with your edible pen. You can also use your scribe for this. Now that I have an edible pen, I like using it, and I wish I used it more when I was first decorating. So that you can draw all these little stencils, and then you're going to mark off everywhere that's black, and you're also going to connect all of the lines. So you can see all the points from the hexagons on the side connect to the center one. And then the points on the side connect to each other to create more hexagons. So that template gives you a really great base that you can build off of. And then I am putting an X in the middle of every single one of the hexagons that are going to be black. One thing you might note from what you see here on the screen is that the black hexagons are a little wide. And so one thing I would recommend is maybe trimming those a little bit when you cut out your template, just so they're not as wide, but it looks fine. I kind of edit a little bit as I'm going through piping and cut off those corners so they're not quite as wide, and you'll see me do that. So now you're going to come in with your black and you're going to outline, and you can see I just dropped it a little bit, so I'm going to come in with my scribe, scrape that off. It's okay if we make accidents while decorating. We can take a spatula, we can take our scribe, scrape that off, and just keep going. It's not a big deal, especially on a pretty naked cookie like this. So I'm going to do my outline, and then I like to immediately go in and pipe with my icing still, because I like when the outline kind of gets absorbed into the flood icing. Now, if my icing is a little bit too thin, like it's spreading a little bit too much, what I will do, instead of remixing it because I'm lazy, is I will go outline every single one of the hexagons, and then I'll come back and fill them. So it has that outline has a little bit of time to set up. But I didn't need to do that with this one. I nailed my icing consistency, which I don't always do. And then I'm going to go in with my scribe as soon as I fill in that hexagon. Just make sure that everything's going to the ends and it's completely filled in. And then I'm going to go on all of the other spaces of the hexagon, outline it, and fill it in with black. And you can already see I'm kind of chopping off. I'm not following the outside lines of that hexagon perfectly. I'm going a little bit on the inside of it because I just felt like they were a little too big. And you'll keep filling that in. The trick with these soccer balls is, one, utilize that template. It's going to make your life so much easier. Also, trusting the process of taking your time. And by that, I don't mean just piping slowly so you can get clean lines. I also mean that you need to let each step crust over. And so what I recommend is to, one, do the black pieces of every single soccer ball, set them aside, and then move on to some other cookies. Do like the base of another cookie. I was doing this soccer ball, base black, did all three of the soccer balls because I did three for my set. And then I did the first step of the volleyballs, and then I could come back and the black would be just crusted over. So it's not going to be as shiny. You'll see that when we get to the next step, which does take some time. The soccer ball is going to take your most time on this set, but it's going to pay off. And that crusted over piece is also going to help our black not bleed into the white because it's dried a little bit. It's not completely foolproof. If you added too much black food coloring to your black royal icing, you're gonna get some bleed, and that's okay. I saw a professional wedding cake the other day that had a lot of color bleed on it, and I noticed it as someone who does a lot of cookie decorating, and color bleed is like the bane of my existence. But did anyone else notice it? No. So we just don't need to be such harsh critics for ourselves. That's what I'm trying to get at. If you can have professionals out here selling cookies and cakes that have color bleed and people are loving them and gushing over them, then we don't need to care about our hobby at home when we're getting color bleed. That doesn't mean that we can't work to avoid having color bleed. Of course, it's a great thing to work towards, but we don't need to beat ourselves up over it if it happens. It's just not that big of a deal. Truly not that big of a deal. So we only have one more of these sections left, this last kind of edge of a hexagon for black. And then you will set this cookie aside and let it dry. Move on to some of your other soccer balls that you have to decorate. Or if you aren't doing the full sports cookie set, then maybe you're doing some other soccer themed cookies for whatever you're decorating this month. You can move on to some of those as well, while you let this dry and you let this crust over, and you know that you're ready to move on to the next step, because it won't look as shiny. And after I fill in this section, you'll see me come back to do some white, and this black will not be nearly as shiny. It'll be a little bit more matte. And if you were to go add more black on top of it, that icing would just kind of sit on top of it. If you've ever tried to fix, like, oh, I accidentally put my thumb in a cookie or something, and you're like, I'll just add a little bit more icing, it won't be that big of a deal, then you know that you can't just add a little bit more icing. So you can see it's still shiny, but it's not as shiny as it was. And so now you're going to go in. You don't want to do any white sections directly next to another white section at this stage. We are just doing white next to black pieces that have dried a little bit. And I feel like I said that in a confusing way. The other thing you're going to want to do is to outline every single piece of your hexagon. Are these still hexagons? They don't look like it, do they? Anywho, shapes. It's been a while since geometry. That should be pretty evident. So I am not immediately going through and piping the white right next to the section I did, because I want to, again, give these sections some time to set up and dry and matte over. And I can do it right against the black because it has had that time. It is what we call crusted over in the cookie world. And the other thing I'm doing here is outlining the section fully. You might think, well, you could just do the two sides that don't have icing next to them, and you can pipe directly next to that black. I find that you don't get a very crisp line, and on a ball like this, you want that crisp line. You want it to be very evident where the seams would be on a soccer ball. And so the last one that I do at this stage, unfortunately, this cookie needs to be done in about 4 different stages because you're not wanting to pipe directly next to fresh icing. So this one, I go onto an outside edge to do that white section and fill it in. And then I didn't really need to use my scribe too much here because the icing evened out pretty much on its own. And then I set this cookie aside and I come back to it after it's crusted over a little. So you can see how shiny it is right here. And then in a moment, it's just a little bit more matte. So it just had a little bit of drying time. And then I'm going to come in and completely outline the section that I'm piping in, the section that I've outlined here. And it doesn't matter whether the section next to it is white or whether that section is black. I'm going to completely outline it because it just helps keep the structure that we're looking for each of these pieces. And now that I have said pentagon and I'm looking at this, or hexagon, the center is a pentagon and the rest are hexagons, and I don't know what happened, but it works, and I didn't notice it until right now. And so I'm not going to care about it. And now I'm questioning whether that's how soccer balls look or not. And I might have to look it up later, but I'm not going to worry about it. It's not going to be a big deal. So I filled in that section. I didn't stop and pull out a scribe because these have kind of self-leveled pretty well. My white's self-leveling pretty well. And so I'm just going to move on to the next section. And this is between two black pieces that are dried and two white pieces that are dried. And so we're just continually looking to fill in a section that is either surrounded by blank areas or by sections that have already crusted over a little bit, not going directly next to a section that I have just piped. So we outline it and then we fill it in. Another tip that I have is I saw someone called it the blob and lift method. And I liked that terminology of you do a little blob of icing touching the cookie and then you lift and you can get a much straighter line. And it also can overlap with some of the other sections and it still look great. So we're going to do our last one for this piping, session before we set this aside to dry again. And this is what I mean by you're doing it in 4 different stages. The first stage is all of the black sections, so they have plentiful time to dry. The second stage is 3 of the white pieces. The third stage is another 3 of the white pieces. And then the fourth stage will be the last 4 white sections. And you can see with this one, the icing didn't self-level very well, so I'm coming in with my scribe to just make sure that everything's where it needs to be. I set it aside to crust over again, and we're going to come in and do these last pieces. And so I'm just touching the cookie a little bit, that little blob and lift, blob, lift, blob, lift. It's kind of fun to say. I don't know if I would really say blob because you don't really want to have like a glob of icing. You just want a touch of icing and then lift and direct it where you want it to. And there's a little bit of space over on the side, so I'm going to take my scribe and just lightly push my icing where I want it to go. And then we're going to move on to these last 3 sections. Blob and lift, blob and lift, blob and lift. And I don't always go in like a full circle when I'm doing this because I just don't feel like I have the visual to be able to do it well a lot of the times. But again, coming in, outlining, filling with my flood, using my scribe to push the icing wherever I want it to be if I need it to fill in any sort of sections. And another thing you'll just see me do right there is I got started and I didn't like how my icing was flowing, so I just put it in the middle of the cookie. Well, in the middle of the section I'm filling in because it's going to be white anyways, so I don't need to go put that on a paper towel or something. I can just dab it on the cookie and it'll become part of the section, which is I'm going to need anyways because it's all white on that section. And I'm just using my scribe to kind of fill in any of the holes that were left after I outlined it, because maybe I didn't outline it perfectly. That's okay. But doing the outline first is going to help create just better lines and better dimension for this cookie altogether. And we're just on this last section. So of course I'm going to have a weird funkiness with my icing. We're going to fill in that section one last time, grab our scribe so that we can even everything out. We can make sure that the icing's going where it needs to be, and there is our soccer ball. It's part of the sports cookie set. Download the guide below. Try it out. Let me know how it goes.